Hey everybody, it's Katie. I've had a lot of people ask about my supernatural childbirth experiences, and so today's video I want to talk about the two supernatural, pain-free childbirths that I experienced with both my daughters, one in 2012 and one in 2016. We're gonna go right through them, one right after the other today, so I hope that what you hear today will be encouraging and will be helpful for you on your journey. This whole thing was actually brought about by a really amazing book. It's called Supernatural Childbirth by Jackie Mize. So at the end of my two stories, my oldest daughter and then my youngest daughter, we're going to have a little card or a link up here. So if this video is encouraging and you're interested in checking out the book, we'll have the link up here, the little card where you can click over to our review of the book, and it'll also give you purchase information should you decide that you want to take a closer look at it. So my first daughter was born in 2012, and I woke up in the morning. My husband was working nights at the time, so he came home, which I think actually I was sort of waking when he came to bed, so I kind of woke up, and I had been having contractions all through the morning, but I had been sort of sleeping through them. I knew something was coming, but it wasn't enough to where I was going to wake up for it. So when he got home, I couldn't go back to sleep, so I got up and kind of paced around and did all the things that they say you're supposed to do to maybe knock off that false labor contraction stuff. Well, none of it went away, so I just paced around the house, did my thing, called the midwives. When my husband woke up that early the afternoon, I said, you need to call your boss and tell him that you're not coming to work, because I think today's the day, and his eyes are okay. So I knew I was in labor pretty much all day, but it wasn't anything where I was in pain or where it was intense. It was more annoying than anything. So by about mid-afternoon, I started to time my contractions, and they were probably 5-7 minutes apart. We called our doula. She came over. She sat with us for a little while. And finally, I decided probably at about 5 o'clock that I wanted to head to the birth center, because I didn't want to be I wasn't worried that I was about to have the baby, but I didn't want to get any closer and then have to get in the car, because that felt like overwhelming, because I was already starting to get in that zone where I needed to be in my safe spot, and I knew I wasn't going to be birthing at the house. So we got in the car, we got to the birth center, and my water broke around, it was about 8:15 or so, 8:15, 8:30, and after that, it was like there was this momentary sense of, when my water broke, like, man, I wish that had happened way sooner, because it's this giant release of all this pressure. But then, of course, that's also signaling that it's like go time. So after my water broke, I hopped in the tub. They had a big birthing tub, and our daughter was born at 9:32 p.m. I didn't have any pain. Now, it's really important that you understand the difference between pain and intensity. I have never experienced anything outside of birth, anything more intense in my entire life. It is literally 100% all-consuming. You can't think of anything else other than that. So it was the most intense thing that I have ever done, but it was not painful. It didn't hurt. It required every ounce of me because of its intensity. So I did tear. There was some complication. My daughter had shoulder dystocia, and the midwives, she was partially out, and so in order to help her come out, I ended up tearing. And even through that, I felt the tear, but it didn't hurt. There wasn't this sharp sense of pain. I felt it. God created us to be amazing. My natural endorphins and everything that's supposed to happen was happening. I didn't have the traditional pain, the pain that you see in the movies, the screaming and the horrible choking out my husband. I didn't have that pain. Now, when we ended up having to go to the hospital to get stitches, and that was actually more uncomfortable than having a baby. I near about kicked resident in the face. So that was actually more intense than the process of having my daughter. With my second daughter, it was very similar. I we live in an area now where the only choice was a home birth or a hospital, and because of the shoulder dystocia with my first daughter, I was a little bit concerned that it might happen again, and I experienced some blood loss, and which had an effect on my health, as you would imagine, and so we decided to go with a hospital, though that is not my comfort zone. But I had an amazing OB, and I figured I trusted him and trusted that it would be okay. About a week before my second daughter was born, my OB told me that he was going to be out of the office for the next week for a particular reason, and apologized and all that, and he said, well, we can induce you, and I'm like, no thanks. And so I thought, great. And so for a minute there, I panicked. I started to get fearful, and I started to freak out, and I was, because my trusted person, my OB, the person that I was going to be doing this with, wasn't going to be there, and there was going to be the on-call doctor and all this stuff, and my brain kind of went for a second there, and I started to be afraid and worrying about stitches and C-sections and induction and all that stuff. And so I had my little panic moment, called my mom, had a good cry. We prayed about it, and I was able to get my peace back and tell fear where to go. So it came to be the night before my due date, and also that was the day that my OB, that was his last day on shift, and I knew that evening that he was off for the next week. And so my husband had worked all day that day, and so we were talking about, he was getting ready to go to bed, and I told him, I went into the bathroom and sat down to go pee, and my water broke, and I thought, well, at least it was in the toilet, that's convenient. So I sat there for a minute, and I went in and I said, I think my water just broke. And he's like, what? And I'm like, no, we don't need to go yet. Like, I think it's fine. Like, my contractions are, because I had been having mild contractions throughout the day, but nothing where I was like, oh, I'm in labor. So I said, I'm just going to lay down and see if I can rest. I'm going to count my contractions or time them. And they were coming, this was at about 10 p.m., so they were coming about every 15 minutes. So I had about 4 contractions, and then it's about 11 o'clock. And I was texting a friend, and she's like, baby's coming soon, and I'm thinking, okay. And I don't actually know why I didn't connect the dots, because with my first daughter, my water broke, and 45 minutes later, I was holding a baby. But I guess because my contractions were 15 minutes apart, I thought, they're going to speed up, because they always tell you don't come to the hospital unless your contractions are a couple minutes apart. So I'm like, I got time. I'm fine. So I get up 11-ish, go back to the bathroom. The rest of my water, I lose the rest of my water, because when you're pregnant, you have to pee like 40 times every hour. So I lost the rest of my water, and I got up and I told my husband, and he goes into like panic mode. He's like, all right. Well, not panic, but like go mode, he's getting the stuff, and he's going to get it in the car, and he calls the doula, and he calls my parents, and he's in go mode. And so I'm sitting on the toilet, because I figured, I was leaking stuff, so I might as well just sit on the toilet to be safe, because I'm thinking, okay, how am I I'm making a mess. So I'm sitting on the toilet, and the contractions had been coming every 15 minutes up until that point. So I had one, it was on the 15-minute mark, and I thought, well, yeah, there it is. So I'm just sitting there, and about a minute and a half later, another one comes, and it's like a wave. Like, I just got smushed, and I'm like, oh no, wait a minute, this isn't supposed to be happening. That was like a minute and a half. And then another one came, like a minute and a half, and I'm like, oh snap, I think that this is going to happen. And so I did a little self-check, and I could feel the baby's head, and I was like, oh God, Holy Spirit. So I called my husband, and he's like, okay, I called your parents and the doula, and are you ready? And I'm like, we are not leaving this house. We're going to have the baby here. And his eyes, and I'm like, you need to call. Well, first I told him to call the hospital, because I had spoken with him a few days prior, and they said, or maybe a couple hours, I forget, but I had spoken with him, and they said, when you're on your way, call us, and we'll make sure that we have a room and nurses ready to attend you. So I had told him, as soon as he called my parents, to call the hospital and tell them we're on our way. And so after he calls the hospital, I'm like, you need to call 911. We're not going to make it. And he tells me later, it's the funniest thing, he says the minute I said that, he's thinking, I'm not listening to what you're saying. I'm actually thinking about how am I going to pick you up off the toilet and get you into the car to the hospital to have the baby there, because we're not having the baby at the house. We're not ready for that. That's what he's thinking. So, long story short, we call 911. I have the baby on the floor in our bathroom, and my husband delivers her and puts her on my chest right about the time that EMS shows up. And they just kind of stand there and watch because our bathroom's about that big. And I had my baby in the bathroom. And from start to finish, it was about, well, when my water broke, it was about 10-ish. And so she was pronounced at 12:43. So it was about 2 hours and 45 minutes. And it was about 45 minutes from when I lost the rest of my water. And again, with this birth, there wasn't any pain. There was great intensity. I mean, great intensity. But there wasn't any pain. And I didn't tear, and I didn't bleed out like I was afraid I was going to. And it was probably the most amazing experience outside of my other birth that I've ever had. As I mentioned before the stories, we were going to put a card up, and we'll have it right up here. So if you see the little link up here, it'll talk about the book review for the book that I mentioned, Supernatural Childbirth by Jackie Mize. And that's actually really what got this whole thing started, which was kind of the snowball effect, leads us to the KT files, was this one book. So if the video today has been encouraging for you, or you think, maybe I want to check this out a little bit more, go ahead and check out the review, and that'll give you a better idea of what it's all about. And it'll also, like I said, give you some information on where to purchase it and that type of thing. If today's video has been encouraging or interesting or anything, and you feel like you know someone who would benefit from watching it, I would be honored if you would consider sharing it. I know that in my pregnancies, having positive material, like i.e. positive childbirth stuff, was a lifeline for me, because so much of what we hear out there is not positive. So if it's encouraging to you at all, and you know someone who's pregnant and would benefit from it, I would be honored if you would consider sharing it. We also have a Facebook page, so if you'd like to check us there, that would be awesome. We'd love to interact with you there as well. And if you liked our video today, give it a thumbs up. And lastly, if you want to join our journey, if you want to be a subscriber, we'd be honored to have you join with us. We do videos every week, mostly just about family and babies and all the stuff that comes along with that. So with that, guys, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thanks for watching our video today, and please join us next week for our next video. Bye.